So, it's it's been a while.
Bruh.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Haunter64. I know I've been gone for a while. I'm back to making videos again. I've had a lot of stuff happen in 2019, but 2020 is gonna be our year. And I've been getting a lot of questions, obviously not in the comments, but like people have came up to me and asked me certain stuff. What I want to talk about is a brief overview of microphones, because a lot of people don't really understand why microphones are so important, or like certain microphones getting certain sound. The first thing we're going to start with is that there are categories of microphones. Now, there are a lot of categories, but there's really three kind of blanketed categories that fit all microphones. So your first category is going to be dynamic microphones. Dynamic microphones are usually the ones that you're going to get if you play a show. They're also the ones you usually use to mic up drums, things like that. They're very useful. They can handle high SPL, but we'll go more in depth on that later. The second type of microphone are known as condenser microphones. These microphones are usually a lot more sensitive. They have a higher frequency response, and they also are normally used like in pristine studio recordings. So like if you ever watch like your favorite band and the singer is in the booth or something, they normally either have this, which is a dynamic microphone, an SM7B, or they have a second microphone that's also tracking in the room, and that's normally a condenser microphone. The third category, which is a category I feel a lot of people actually don't know that much about, is actually known as ribbon microphones. Now, ribbon microphones are really rare, mostly for the fact that they're extremely expensive, and two, a lot of people tend to stay away from them because they are extremely sensitive and fragile. But let's get into the next section. So we know our three types of microphones: our dynamics, our condensers, as well as our ribbon microphones. What we need to know next is what is called polar patterns. Now, a polar pattern is basically how your microphone reacts to, or I'm sorry, it's how your microphone picks up the sound that is being transmitted. There's really about 5 different polar patterns. The first one is known as omnidirectional. Now, what does omnidirectional mean? Omni meaning everywhere, directional meaning the direction it's in. So basically, it takes sound from everywhere. They're very good, used for like rooms. They're good for voiceover, depending on what room you're in. An omnidirectional mic will take from in front, behind, sides, up, down, diagonal. Any way you give it sound, it's going to take the sound. The next one is going to be known as a cardioid, which is actually the type of microphone I'm using, which is SM7B. SM7B, I think dynamic cardioid should be on there. But cardioid mic, it really has kind of like a heart-shaped pattern, which is why it's a cardioid, kind of like cardio. It has a heart-shaped pattern that kind of goes around the back like this and then captures what's in front. The next one is known as a supercardioid. The supercardioid has, it's literally a little bit wider in its acceptance, and it has a little bit of acceptance behind the microphone as well as in front of it. The next thing is known as a hypercardioid. Now, the difference between a supercardioid and a hypercardioid is the fact that a hypercardioid is a lot more focused in its frequency response. I mean, more focused in its acceptance. So instead of being a big round heart shape, it's more of a smaller heart shape. Think of like the hearts you used to draw for your Valentine and Valentine's Day. Yeah, those ugly things. It's a lot like that. And then in the back, it has a bigger acceptance rate of sound as well. Bidirectional microphones accept sound on a 90-degree angle. The Sennheiser E609, it's not a bidirectional microphone, but it kind of explains it a lot better. So as you can see with the Sennheiser E609, it's flat like this. They do have microphones like this. Sennheiser makes them, and so as you can see right here in the front, I don't know if you can focus on that, but it says front on here, and then the back it's blanketed out. They do have one where it accepts sounds on both sides. So a bidirectional microphone will take sound from this side as well as this side. That's just bidirectional microphones. They're pretty cool. Let's actually jump backwards a little bit and talk about those 3 different microphone types, their characteristics, why you would choose one over another in certain situations. Like I said before, the microphone I use for voiceover is an SM7B. It's made by Shure, and this microphone is actually a dynamic microphone. It's not a cardioid. Why is this important? Dynamic microphones, they have really 3 big characteristics that differentiate it from the other subcategories. A dynamic microphone, for one, normally has a very good response from its low mids to mid kind of tier. So it's great for if you're just talking because you're not trying to capture those overtones and singing. It's good for guitars, which are very mid-focused. They're also good for bass guitars. The second characteristic that makes them super useful is the fact that they can handle really loud SPL. SPL is sound pressure level. Basically, with higher SPL, these microphones are very good at taking like hard transients. And a transient, it basically in a waveform is the beginning of the waveform. So you have a waveform that goes up, and then kind of down like that. They're very good at taking high transients. So like a snare drum has a very high transient, high SPL. You're going to want to put dynamic mics on those. Dynamic microphones are normally very rough. Like you can take them on tour and they aren't going to quit out on you after like 2 shows if you drop them. So for your dynamic microphones, you have 2 types. You have a large diaphragm dynamic microphone, which is what this SM7B is, as well as a small diaphragm dynamic, which is like this guy, an SM57. I'm sure you guys have all seen this, but this is a small diaphragm dynamic microphone. Next category we want to talk about is known as the condenser microphones. Now, condenser microphones, like I said before, are sensitive. With a condenser microphone, the thing you really kind of want to look out for with those guys is known as phantom power. Almost all condenser microphones need phantom power, which if you look on an interface or a board, it's normally labeled as 48 volts. It's just known as phantom power. It's just another form of getting from mic level to line level. With condensers, like I said, it's the same thing. You have your large diaphragm condensers, like this guy here, as well as small diaphragm condensers, like this guy here. The principles still apply, however, with condenser microphones, a very big difference is that the frequency range can change drastically between diaphragm sizes. So diaphragm sizes are important on dynamic. I feel they're more important on a cardioid, however, because a cardioid is a lot more responsive to things such as overtones, fundamentals, even getting like the high 10K upwards air. They're very good at capturing that. A lot of dynamics will either swoop out around that, like they normally swoop out around between maybe 5 to 7K for a dynamic, and then once you hit about 10-12K, they just drop off completely. Most condensers normally have a small boost towards the high end, so that way it gets a lot of those overtones, the airiness, and they're very useful. They can be used on like acoustics, great for overheads, great for vocals. They're also good for room mics as well if you want to use them that way. They're also great on snares. However, if you do use them on snare, you have to be very careful with the gain that you dial in on it. Now, on to the third category, which I feel like is the one no one really knows about, and these are known as ribbon microphones. What is a ribbon microphone? Well, I'll tell you, Junior. A ribbon microphone, basically, all microphones we know work with a coil attached to a magnet that turns acoustic sound into digital sound into our DAW, and then vice versa coming out through our speakers. That's very nerdy stuff. We don't have to get into all that, but if you do want to have a video like that, let me know. I'd love to get into that. The important thing to know about ribbon microphones is that their coils are actually made out of, usually made out of an aluminum strip. And so the aluminum strip kind of hangs faceted from a top and a bottom section, and the strip actually vibrates between those, and then the magnet picks up the vibrations. Coils are kind of the same thing, except a coil is normally wrapped around the magnet, whereas this one, the coil is kind of fed into the magnet on a ribbon. The thing you need to know about ribbon microphones is you need to be extremely careful with them, because their capsules are very sensitive due to the aluminum strip that normally hangs. The aluminum strip can get burned out, so if the ribbon microphone does not require 48 volts, do not send it, because you can overload its capacitor, and that will destroy your ribbon mic, and you will not have a ribbon mic anymore. And like I said, ribbon mics are expensive. Now, a ribbon microphone, the characteristics of a ribbon microphone, besides it being expensive obviously, is the fact that they're normally known as a very dark type of microphone. Now, I know you've heard engineers, guitarists, musicians all talk about a very dark sound, a very bright sound. Oh, I'm a drummer, I want very dark cymbals. I'm a guitar player, these strings make it sound very bright. Now, essentially, if you're a producer or you work in a studio, what that means is you're really talking about its frequency response. Now, a ribbon microphone has a very mid-focus frequency response, kind of like your dynamic microphone, but the thing that's nice about them, at least what I've noticed when I use them on guitar cabinets, is that they are very dark, meaning they reject a lot of high-end energy. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, because I feel like we've been rambling on microphones for a very long time, is how do I pick the right microphone? How do I know which microphone is right for me? Well, it all, like I said, one, personal preference. That's always going to be a thing. You may hear every engineer under the sun reference an SM7B, and someone else might say, oh, I'd rather have a C414 by AKG. It's personal preference. The other thing you need to know is what is known as a frequency response. Now, frequency responses are extremely important. They do differ. They don't follow the traditional dynamic condenser ribbon microphone formula. Some microphones, especially nowadays with technology, can actually be changed in their responses. I think Steven Slate has a microphone that you can actually change its pickup responses, which is pretty nice. But that is one thing you want to look out for. I know, at least with SM57s, normally there's a roll-off probably around 60 or 80 hertz. There's a dip between 5-7K, and then a roll-off around like 12 to 14. That's just information you need to know. It comes with knowing your frequencies. And on top of that, you just need to know like what works for you personally, because every studio, every situation, every technique is completely different. Like if I have the SM7B, a big requirement for the SM7B is you need something that has a very good gain stage. The SM7B I think requires anywhere between like 60 to 68 dB of gain before it gets to a good line level. So for me, I know my interface I think goes up to probably about 48, 52-ish dB. So I actually have to use an external mic preamp to feed it into my interface, so that way it all works out completely. Aside from frequency responses as well is if 48 volts is required, and knowing about this thing known as proximity effects. So 48 volts, like I said, is just extra power. Some dynamic mics do need it. The nice thing about dynamics is if you have a, say you have an interface and your interface has 4 channels, but your 48 volts can only affect channel 1 and 2, or it can only affect all 4 at once. The nice thing about a dynamic microphone is that most dynamic microphones, not all of them, can actually handle if you send them 48 volts without damaging the microphone whatsoever. A lot of condensers that don't need 48 volts, but you send them 48 volts, can actually damage their capsules. Same with a ribbon mic, you can completely destroy the mic, but most dynamics do not care. It's very useful. I can turn on 48 volts right now and my mic will be completely fine. I just know, at least for this model. Why did I hit it, bro? This other thing I was talking about, known as proximity effect, is basically the closer that you get to a microphone, the more low end you're going to receive from its response. When waveforms develop, bass frequencies typically take up more energy, which means they also have bigger wavelengths. And the closer you are to the microphone has less time to process the higher frequencies, which don't require nearly as much energy as the low frequencies. That's all it really is. I really hope that this guide was helpful on microphones. If you want to go more in depth or you have any other questions, please feel free to leave a comment. You can also hit me up on my Instagram. I have a Twitter. I don't know how it works because I'm old. Keep creating, guys. Like, don't think that just because you don't have something, it's gonna stop you. What I like to tell people is if you have something that is stopping you in your life, then you just need to be more creative and figure out a way around it. Don't rob Guitar Center. Don't just steal someone's mic. That's pretty bad. You don't want to do that. Happy New Year. I totally missed out on that. Happy New Decade. I know that's a huge thing. 2020. That's crazy. And I'll probably be back with another video by next week. And like I said, comment, like, subscribe. You know the deal. Every YouTuber tells you how to do it nowadays. But if you subscribe, I will send you. I'll send you one 48 volt, one phantom powder. Everyone only gets one though. Good? You got that. Good job editing, Devin. You're doing God's work.